What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of the Dragzine podcast. I'm your host, Senior Associate Editor Brian Wagner. My guest this week is Craig Sullivan. Craig, what's going on?
It's a good day in the neighborhood, dude. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been on the up and up for you the back half of the year with the old the hot rod. You brought out Mero Mero and kind of grabbed a lot of people's attention, picked up some wins, and you've had a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been great. We built a brand new car, had a lot of vendors that participated in the build, and we let them do what they done best. And we come out of the box and we win the first one. We're still in at 4 cars at night under fire when they lost power. We got to the semifinals at NMCA Martin, and we won Indy. So out of 4 hits, we've got 2 wins and 2 semifinal runner-ups, or 2 semifinals. It's been a good time.
Yeah, I've got definitely a lot of questions I want to hit up for the Pro Mod for sure, just because that car legit captured so many people's attention, which is really amazing. But I think before we get to that, we kind of we got to build the story around that, because I think there's a lot to be told here. Why people don't question why Madman do the things they do. And I think we need to figure out why you wanted to build a 49 Merc Pro Mod. But I was looking into you, and you grew up around racing with your dad. And what really captured your imagination about racing at a young age?
My father run modified production for years, and he I'm sorry, I lost you on the screen for some reason.
Oh, it's all good. I could still see you though. That's all important. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Then we can just roll with it.
Okay. No, my dad run modified production for years, and had a little bit of luck, not a whole lot, just a guy doing it on his own, and that's what kind of got me into the racing side. And never received any big sponsorship monies, never received a team car with a large corporation that really worked in the racing world. But we've been fortunate enough to do things our way, and we've brought a lot of manufacturers with us, and a lot of good help.
And the modified production days, kind of talk about that, because that was an interesting era of drag racing to grow up in, I'm sure, and kind of provided you a lot of opportunity to see some pretty cool stuff.
I did, and to be 18 to 25 in that era would have been awesome. But unfortunately, I was 5, 6, 7, so it just made loud noises and done wheelies.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people, kind of forget, is there was a time before bracket racing, radio racing, and heads-up racing in the way that we see it, that there was a lot of other forms of racing that you kind of had to be very creative to get into, right?
Yeah, you really did. And bracket racing and street racing is kind of where we fell into it. Grew up on the west side of Indianapolis, and we'd all cruise the South Side Strip and look for a race here and there. And, there really wasn't the Wednesday night street races at Raceway Park at that point in time. And luckily that's around now to kind of control the street racing.
What was the first kind of hot rod type vehicle that you had that you started toying with and trying to figure out how to make go faster?
I had a 61 Fairlane, and a 61 Fairlane back then was a Galaxy. So it was a big car, had a 292 Y block in it and a 3-speed. And it quickly got 3 deuces put on it, and a 4-speed put in it, and a camshaft, and kept it put together with Band-Aids and baling wire. And we done pretty good with it.
That's always the interesting era when you're messing with cars like that, because it's almost comical when you park them by a modern vehicle. You forget how big they are, and they're kind of sledgehammers. There wasn't a lot of technology with those cars, right?
Correct. Yeah, it was pretty much rev it up and dump the clutch on a little F78 14 tire and figure out how to go faster. And back then we didn't know slowing down got you faster.
No, it was just it was a matter of just trying to attempt to get power to the pavement and just grab gears, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, you also raced super stock as well, which is one of my favorite forms of drag racing because that's where I think like stock, super stock, and comp are where some of the smartest people live because you get put in a very interesting box when it comes to rules. What attracted you to super stock racing?
We had been top dragster racing and Jegs Quick 32 racing for a long time in a dragster, and we were having fun with it. And I decided I wanted to go super stock racing, and we had taken a Fox body hatchback that had been a drag radial car and kind of turned it into a super stock with a 352 Cobra Jet in it. And I showed up to my first event in Bella Rose, Louisiana for the Jegs Open. And the Kevin Helms come over and go, Craig, what are you doing? Because I showed up with drag radials on, Pro 275s, and beadlocks on this car to run super stock. And we learned a few things. We obviously didn't win class. That area is pretty strong at that class level. But we come around pretty quickly with it, and we're able to set the record at St. Louis, and had a pretty good time with it.
I could only imagine those super stock racers seeing a beadlock small tire car roll in the lanes that the level of confusion must have been relatively high with them.
It was, especially since it was a stock suspension car. I mean, it still had the 8.8 under it. It still had the stock trailing arms under it that had been beefed up a little bit. And, it rolled out there, and it was pretty competitive once we got a few things lined out.
Yeah, that's again what I think attracts a lot of people to super stock. And what I think is cool is that you really have to be very smart with how you play with that vehicle and just throwing piles of cash help, but it's definitely not going to make you the fastest guy out there because you got to be pretty ingenuitive.
Yeah, you do. We had run Big Stuff 3 on our top dragster for quite a while, and we're one of the first guys to bring that to top dragster, the EFI product. And so we used it in our super stock deal. And, Joe Oplowski from Hyperactive has been with me since prior to super stock with the EFI product. And, it was fun. We had a real good time with it. We got to learn how some of that manages, and I can correlate some of the way that little small block Ford run with a Roots Pro Mod at this point in time. And, so some of that bleeds over, and you just got to think outside of the box a little bit to be successful.
Yeah, and that's I think that definitely kind of defines a lot of drag racing, but especially that class, and that you be able to take what you learned and drew it into a pro mods. Interesting. Now, top dragster, how did you end up kind of getting in that? Because that's a pretty intense class to make, to run. A lot of people don't realize how quick and fast those cars are. You're still trying to bracket race them essentially.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, here in Division 3, we have the Jegs Quick 32, and it's pretty much a breeding grounds for top dragster. Myself, Philip Oakley, there's just a pile of JB Straswig, Al Peevler. There's a bunch of us that have run that series for a long time, so it was a natural step for us to move up. And back in those days, you'd be from 450 to 456. They had 32 cars in there. So it was almost an index race at that point. And I think now they've got that lowered from 450 to like 454 with 32 cars in there. So, when you show up to that, there's a bunch of professional 8th-mile racers there that are prepared to go 450. And it makes it pretty tough. So then when you switch over to the quarter-mile stuff, you get to ease up on the car on the front, but you got to really make it run out the back. And, the EFI product really got us to where we had a good manageable piece and could manage our nitrous tune-ups to the infinite side. So it wasn't near as much of a guessing game with carburetors. And, as long as you've got your atmosphere in the bottle, it's pretty predictable.
Yeah, and that's the, being here in Division 3, Top Sportsman and Top Dragster are, man, they're meat grinders. You go to a lot of these events in this region, and if you don't have your program right and tight, you're in for a long, long weekend, or potentially short weekend too, depending on who you get first round.
Exactly, exactly. But you definitely don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight in Division 3.
No, it was funny to see, as I started to follow Top Dragster more when it was still the 6.0 level, just how many cars were right in that like 600 range, or like would tip to the naughty side to the fives, and just the repeatability of going that fast. What's it take to be able to do that? Because the faster you go, the harder it is, let alone to do it, at a bracket racing level.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Johnson went 242 in top sportsman trim this weekend at St. Louis. So you're going to run down there with a car that'll run, 680s and a top sportsman car that might run 185. And this 55 Chevrolet comes blowing by you at 242. And according to Brett Kepner, I guess that's 5 miles off the record, 5 mile an hour off the record. But, it's measuring things in the nth degree. 15 years ago, you could measure that with a yardstick. Well, now you got to get the micrometer out to measure every bit of performance in your program and get it to the nth degree.
What's it like trying to judge the stripe going that fast at a dragster? Because that's got to be kind of wild when you're trying to line someone up for that.
I mean, when you drive with your eyes shut, you're not judging anything. You're counting to 5 and you pull the parachute.
Interesting driving technique. That's a bold strategy. And I'm sure there might be a couple of people out there that are somewhat close to that, to us mildly terrifying, but it's like you said, someone going screaming by at that speed, like coming up on somebody, that's got to be wild.
Yeah, you can't judge it. I mean, you're in it to run it out the back, and that's what you do. And the Johnsons have mastered that quite well. I think Andrew's dad has several championships under his belt. They're the guys you measure yourself up against in that category.
That's interesting, because I guess in my mind, I always thought that top sportsman and top dragster, you're still trying to maybe, like, I always wondered if there's any kind of stripe judging going on, but apparently it's just you put the tune up in for what you think the dialing's going to go, and you let a rip tater chip, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's still some guys driving the finish line. I mean, when you've got somebody that's at a similar mile an hour, that technique still works. But when you're carrying 20 or 25 mile an hour or 40 mile an hour over somebody, there's just no way possible.
That's the more you think about that, that's got to be just absolutely, that's intense to be rolling up on somebody with that much mile an hour that quick.
Well, it keeps you thinking while you're waiting on that tree to come down and your car to go. So you've let go of the button at the same time. And when they're sitting at 3 or 4 or 500 feet down the track, you're going, is this thing ever going to leave?
Yeah. You see those I call them the comedic matchups in like stock or super stock, where it's like a 15-second car against, a Hemi Cuda or a Copo, and the guy's sitting on the starting line doing his taxes, and he's got to spot this dude at 8-second lead. That's not a fun time for anybody involved.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Especially when you're the person being chased, and that hound dog's coming, and they're coming hard and fast. And that's,
Yeah.
a big difference between those cars and a top dragster or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you get in that little Maverick that's a 6-cylinder automatic car that is running that 17 or 18-second deal. Or Brian Olson used to have his Escort service that was, 1982, 1983 Escort that I think run 18 seconds in stock. So it's there's some comical matchups, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's, I guess, when you look at the faster classes, it's not quite as there, but then it comes down to being able to know your machine and whatnot. That's pretty important. What have you been able to pull from Top Dragster to use in Pro Mod?
Well, there's a lot of guys that don't pay attention to the front half of the racetrack. I mean, the, it seems like everybody has sharpened up their skills on their tree and got it to where they could hit the tree, but they're still consistent in going down the track or keys and Pro Mod. And if you only go down the track one of 6 times or one of 3 times, that's not a very good ratio. And that's what we had to do with the barn burner, because that was a 2006 car. And not that they run a whole bunch of 8th mile back then, but that car was built to go 440, 430 in the 8th. And the Snowbirds last year, we went 367 in that car. You know, that car was never built to go that fast.
Yeah.
And, so, you know, when you look at being able to hit the tree and the convenience factor of what you've got to do to back the car up, and the gentleman in St. Louis that used to build Pro Mods, but then he was a YouTube star, and he still don't build Pro Mods. He builds a bunch of parts. Tim, what's his name?
McCamus.
McCamus, yeah. Yeah. My car is very much the kind of car that he describes. My Pro Mod is set up like a bracket car. I can turn the power on by myself. I can turn the CO2 bottle on by myself. I can start the car by myself. You know, and part of that is I have one full-time crew guy, and I have a part-time guy, and I've got Joe Oplowski from Hyperactive. So these guys that have got 5 and 6 and 7 people on their crew, you know, either they've got way better friends than me, or they got a big payroll to pay. So, you know, we set the car up that, you know, if you wanted to go top sportsman racing, it's not far from it. Throw the lay box and I can go.
And I think that's interesting that you kind of approach it that way. And I mean, it makes sense to be able to run with a small crew, to be able to get a car started and stuff like that by yourself. Because if something goes wrong, you can, for lack of better terms, troubleshoot in a hurry if you need to inside the car.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, with the fuel tech, I've got, you know, 5 tune-ups available to me at a touch of a screen. So as long as we've got some different deviations there, but if you got 2 guys starting a car and somebody trips and falls, and, you know, they get hurt to where they can't get back up and start the car, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times, you know, at night it's dark, you really can't see a whole lot. But it takes that much away that me as the driver still have control of. So it's 100% my fault when there's an issue.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because you let me sit in barn burner and start it up one time, and it's interesting when you're in a car like that with that blower there that the cars seem like they're big from the outside until you get in that seat and you're contained and you're restrained, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I need to kind of have this stuff where I can reach it, you know, just in case, right?
Right. You know, in the barn burner, we learned, because it was an older car and it had a race pack dash in it, the FT600 was over on the passenger side. Well, we knew that when we built a new car that it was going to be in front of me. So if I needed to make that change, it's there so I can make it.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting to tie back to what you said, that a car is only made to go so fast and so quick, that's again something that might be lost on a lot of people, that the different cars for different ETs have little tricks built into them so they can be repeatable and survive at that level, because it's a whole different animal, like you said, to step from a 360 or 370 something to a 4-second car. That's a big jump.
Oh, it is. And you know, it's seat time that makes you better. And you know, there's a lot of people that have done things a lot of different ways and have been successful. And it doesn't mean that it's not the right way, or the way I do it's the wrong way. That's the way we prefer to do it. You know, and right now you've got a lot of Pro Mods with 3, 4, or 5 speeds in them, depending on what they're doing. And we run a 3-speed turbo because it fits our schedule, or it fits the way we want the car to work the best. You know, I think you got to be half rocket scientist to run a Liberty right now. And Melanie Salemi's the best at it. You know, but there's a lot of actions that it takes to back that car up, you know, after you do the burnout.
Yeah.
And with mine, it's stupid dumb. You put it in R for reverse, and push the trans brake button and it backs up.
Yeah, I feel like in some of those Liberty cars, you have to almost like cast a spell to like to get them to go forward or back. Because I look at this thing, I'm like, that's a lot of solenoids. There's a lot of moving parts there for something to go wrong. Versus, like you said, old turbo 350 or 400. There's a lot less in there that can go wrong.
Exactly.
You know, it's like I always joke, the best tool is a hammer because it ain't got no moving parts.
There you go.
Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break here on the Dragzine podcast with Craig Sullivan. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsor.
Moser Engineering has been racing across 5 decades and through 3 generations of family. We have also been supporting sportsman ranks since the beginning with our lightning fast 2-day turnaround time. Everything we make from axles, rear ends, suspension, brakes, and more are made right here in the USA with one goal in mind, so you can win. To learn more, check us out online at moserengineering.com.
All right, we're back on the Dragzine podcast with Craig Sullivan talking about Black Magic transmissions and everything in between, which is it's interesting from your perspective. Like you said, you've been around the game for a while. How do you approach the newest and neatest whiz bang toys? Do you kind of take a step back and let other people R&D it, or are you one of the guys that's like, oh, I got to jump in on whatever that is, outside of Liberty transmissions, of course?
I don't know. We've got a pretty tried and true group of vendors we work with, and Mark Mickey at M&M is one of them, and he pretty much keeps us abreast of the new technology and the transmission stuff, and tries to keep us on point. Darren Mayer does all of our blower stuff. He also consults with us to help us get to where we need to be. And we don't always go the route that Darren shows us, but sometimes we show Darren a different way to get there. And that's kind of one of the things of looking at everything outside the box that has worked so well for us. The guys that have been doing this for ages, they have their way of going about it, and it works great for them. We just refuse to be caught into that scenario. So we try to make it simpler every time we go to bat.
And I guess that also kind of really plays into how it makes running one of these cars easier, especially at the pro mod level like you guys do, is that simple can sometimes be great because it makes getting things done a lot easier, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. And it's less manpower. The Tommy Radloff that runs my engine shop and manages the car, he's always playing with camshaft and piston design. And I pretty much never know what camshafts in a vehicle when we show up. And we collect data and we get it back to the right people to see what we can do to make valve springs live longer, or does this make us an extra 300 horsepower, but you got to change intake springs every pass. And, it's what does it take to make it better? And, you can always be on the edge to go faster, but if you have to do a complete overhaul every time you do that, then it's counterproductive. So we're kind of we don't ever look to be the number one qualifier, but we intend on going rounds and winning. And we just kind of stay in that rhythm and keep that mindset.
Yeah, I think that, you see that at a certain level, that it's never the car that you're worried about that's hitting a home run ball. The car that is consistent is the one that you really need to worry about, because they're going to get down that track every time and wreak a lot of havoc on the competition. That's a sweet spot you want to be in, right?
Yeah, it is. And well, our last race at Indy, number one qualifier was Ken Cartuccio. We were number 2. At that point, he was 400s faster than us. And then when we come up for first round, every round we were the fast car in eliminations, and we run Ken in the final. And I think performance-wise, we might have been 6th faster than him. But we have always struggled in qualifying with our older car, and it looks like the newer car, we're a little more ahead of the game. There's less curveballs.
Yeah, it's a lot less that it's like math. Math gets easier the more variables you pull out. That's the way I don't like. I like my numbers and my letters separate. Same thing goes
Yes,
to drag racing, right?
exactly,
Simpler the
exactly.
better. And you touched on, the engine portion of the thing. And a lot of people, I don't think they realize you guys do like your own engines. You have a shop in the whole deal, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. I started Wild Irish Engines 2 or 3 years ago, and that was one of the things getting Tommy to move down here to Indy. Was him being able to have control over that and the development. And you know, you've always got a preference of vehicles you want to work on or engine styles that you want to work on, and sometimes that's not the way it works. I had a gentleman bring in a 2-liter BMW, uh, naturally aspirated, that we done for them back in October of last year, and they show up at Daytona and they win their class, and they go to Sebring and they come in second. And we got 2 more engines from them to go through for them. So um, we see a lot of that, and I think that Tommy and the guys have a lot to bring to the table at our engine shop. So
And that kind of, that's got to be good for, like you mentioned, you guys go through and you experiment a lot, being able to do that in house, and then also getting other engines to play with, where you guys kind of are having that ability to build a database and learn and use that in your own program, right?
yeah, yeah. We are very fortunate. We've got another SCCA customer that's been bringing in 6 Honda V8s, and this was 8-year-old, 10-year-old technology at the Indy 500 at the IRL level. So we're going to get to take a look at some of that to see what we can take from that. But we also have to build them a reliable piece to go perform at the level of competition that they're at. So it's pretty informative.
Oh yeah, and with endurance engines, that's like dirt track late model engines. Those things take a beating. Those dudes are not kind to those engines at
No,
all.
not at all. Not at all.
Those valve that valve train is just doing things that it's not happy doing a lot.
Correct. And what that might do is that might mean, you got to take a little lift out, put a little more duration in it to get it to live. And yeah, it doesn't have the peak horsepower that everybody likes to brag about, but it's got the average because you're adding more power to the bottom and taking a little off the top to get it to where it's got longevity.
Well, and I think this is something that a lot of drag racers will appreciate too, is that you've got that window that you want that power and that usable power, and you base it on what you're trying to do. Especially, if you've got a screw blown Hemi versus another kind of engine, they all like their steaks cooked a little different, don't they?
They do. They do. I mean, I have been told by a couple of my vendors, we're 300 horsepower short in comparison to some other Pro Mod racers. Well, when you get down to it and you look at the averages, we were 80 horsepower short when you go through the range of operation that it's at. So when somebody tells you you're 300 short, you kind of look at yourself and go, how dumb can we be? But when it comes down to 80 over the average, that's pretty easy to overcome.
Yeah, and I think that with pro mod racing, is it something where you're trying to get all of that usable horsepower throughout the entire run, right? Versus just in one particular area, because that's what's going to help carry you through the whole pass.
Yeah, and then the management of that power. So you could make more power, but it could be, something that when you put a half a degree in, it flips over and it picks up another 150 horsepower. Where if you've got something that it takes you to put a degree in it to get it, or a degree and a half, it's far more you're manageable. You're not on that slippery slope to where, if the dew point hits, you're not going down the track.
Yeah, and with pro mods, it's obviously an extremely popular class, and one of the ones you can get a lot of racing done. And what was it like? I always find this interesting. The first time you got in a screw blown pro mod, that's a whole lot of a lot of angry engine. What was that like for you to start driving a blown door car?
It was a different experience because I was coming out of my dragster. But when you look at the G meter and and the other things that go along with it, it wasn't that big of a change on how big a kick in the seat it was. What it was you had to drive it now. It wasn't like you were in your dragster and had done a wheelie for 300 feet and you could eat a piece of pizza and it shifted and then you pulled the parachute and you turned off. You know, with the barn burner, you had to drive it all 660 feet. So when we left from the roots to the screw, it was pretty eye-opening at that point in time.
Yeah, what's the difference between going from a roots to a screw outside? One is kind of angry and one is extraordinarily pissed off.
Yeah, the root stuff I like to compare to a super stocker. It's a pretty fine tooth piece of equipment because everything has to be working in conjunction. With the screw, I'm going to say you only utilize 80 to 85% of the horsepower available. I mean, when you look at it, it's all about power management. And, you really, in my opinion, you really don't get to a place to where you don't know what's going to happen until you put a 315 radial on it or a 275 radial on it. Then you don't know what's going to happen. It'll step out on you quicker than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, that's you drove the barn burner with both on, slicks and radials on it. Which was your favorite to use?
The car actually responded to the radial much better than it did the slick.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it liked that much more. We were just so far behind in the power side at that point in time that we weren't really competitive enough to go run with all those guys. But Mark Woodruff has allowed me to drive both his '69 Camaro and RVW and the Corvette and Pro 275, and those cars can go away in an instant.
Yeah, that's the you talk to a lot of guys that have driven both, and the radials are more stable. It's a go or no
Until
go.
they're not.
Yeah. Everything's going fine until you see until you see the tack screaming at you, right?
Right.
Versus a slick is like, you have to drive it more like a boat, and it's,
Right.
you got to kind of guide it a little bit, kind of where you want to go. It's like a dance, isn't it?
Yeah. You're herding cats. You just got to keep them in between the lines and the wall.
Yeah. That's a very good way to put it. That's if you watch a pro mod on slicks from the rear, that's how it looks a lot. If it's going straight, it's going slow, right?
Right. Exactly.
Now, what was it like kind of jumping in one of those turbo door cars of Mark's? Because again, that's another complete shift, isn't it? In power management and where the kick in the pants comes in, right?
Oh yeah. No, my first full pass in Mark's Corvette, I don't know, about 300 feet, I kind of drove it towards the center line, and I come back and Brent Sansui, he's gone, "What happened to you? Why'd you lift in the middle?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I really didn't know I was there." I said, "I couldn't tell how fast I was going. So I looked at the grandstands and the light posts there at Orlando to figure out how fast it was going, because when it left, it just, it wasn't the kick in the seat. And then all of a sudden the G meter kicks in and starts dragging you along. So it's a very different sensation of what's going on." And, then the other side is the standard operating procedure to be able to stage that turbo car. I'll never forget it. It was about my fourth or fifth pass, and Woody's standing next to me, and I get up there and I get ready to start bumping in, and the car won't bump in. I tried it 3 or 4 times. I shut the car off, open the door. He goes, "What's wrong?" I go, "It won't bump in." He says, "The little pedal on the right, you got to put it on the mat." So I shut the door, I started it back up, and I bumped it in, and I made a run. But it was one of those things that it wasn't exactly what I was used to doing. So it took a while to relearn that. And, being able to stay calm and ask questions and then everybody laugh at you afterwards it's all right. It was pretty cool.
Big difference between having the old blower right foot and the turbo right foot, right?
Exactly.
One of those is wound up and ready to go at any point in that turbo car. You try to pedal it, it's going to react a little bit different, I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah. You pedal a turbo car, you just need to shut it off, because you're never going to get back control of everything again.
Yeah, and that's the key, is getting control, because that, again, at that radial, it could all of a sudden decide it wants to come unglued, and if you're down track at a high rate of speed, that's not the play you want to be in.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Now, have you ever raced one of the turbo cars in the full quarter mile?
No, I haven't. I've not even run a Pro Mod quarter mile. The fastest thing I've been in is my Dragster, and it's probably been almost 10 years ago since I run it, and it goes 6.0s. It went 6.09 at 231.
For some reason, I thought you did the one of the quarter mile Pro Mod events. I find that interesting. I thought you did.
Well, we went, when we brought the barn burner out, we went to West Palm for a opener Pro Mod event there. But we were basically just trying to figure out how to make it go down the track and stay out of everybody's way. So we had no intentions of running quarter mile there.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you're not wanting to make full rips when you're just trying to figure out, first time in a door car, like, how we make this thing go. That's not the safest route to go, right?
No, not at all. And part of that is you have to go to places like that because your local track doesn't prep for that, and your local track may or may not have the right safety equipment there. And that's the big thing when you transition from bracket racing and national event racing, and you're going to do some outlaw stuff. Is do they have the right people there to cut you out of the car? Do they have the right people for the medical side? And unfortunately, that's all things you have to weigh out.
Yeah, there's I think sometimes people might get a little overzealous. Oh, it pays this amount. Well, does their ambulance actually have supplies in it, or is it just a box on wheels?
Right. Has it been started in the last 2 years?
Yeah. And I mean, we've all been to those tracks where it's like you roll through the gate, you're like, this is definitely an outlaw track. And, you ask yourself, do I feel comfortable trying to make a hit as fast as I'm going to try to go down this track?
Yes, I agree.
And there is no shame, like I said, in asking questions, or, being out a little bit on a tech card versus, wadding up a car, having big problems.
Oh, yes.
Now, we're going to take another quick break here on the Dragzine podcast. When we get back here, we're going to talk to Craig about his new toy, the Killer Merc that he drives. We'll be back right here on the Dragzine podcast.
Pro Mod racers are dominating the strip with Pat Musi power, and now you can rule the street with a new Edelbrock Musi 555 crate engine. Every 555 is built by Pat Musi in his North Carolina race shop using the best Edelbrock components. These big blocks make up to 723 horsepower on 91 octane pump gas with the reliability that Musi engines are known for. The Edelbrock Musi 555 is available in Pro Flow 4 EFI or carbureted versions and are covered by Edelbrock's industry-leading 24-month warranty. Get full specs at edelbrock.com/Musi-racing.
All right, we're back on the show with Craig Sullivan, and Craig, you were known for the barn burner for a while, that killer Dodge. What made you decide to go with that vehicle over your typical traditional Pro Mod?
Well, even with our Dragster product, it was usually something very different. We work with American race cars to come up with the first purpose-built top Dragster that was a hardtail. And, it was very successful, and it kind of forced the shock guys to step up to figure out how they were going to take these swing arm and four-link Dragsters to get them to run there. And it took them a little bit, but, there's a lot of swing arm cars out there that are running as fast as any of the hardtails ever thought about. And, the barn burner was kind of what it was because I traded a Dragster for it and some cash, and, I gotten it from Chip King, and those are pretty ugly cars when you look at what a real Daytona or what they look like when they were put out of the factory, and what NASCAR had used. And there really wasn't a good way to put color on it to make it look like it fit the car, and we decided that it was it had to be something that was natural. And the easiest way to do that was, this was a car that Petty got mad at and put out behind the bar. And the weeds grew up around it and everything else. And we took it and turned it into a Pro Mod. But when you look at what we were able to do with it, I'm extremely happy with it. The late Brian Olson told me that it'd sell a ton of T-shirts, and it sold a bunch, but Mero Mero has outsold it in T-shirts already. And we sold maybe $10,000 in T-shirts on the barn burner in a 4 or 5 year period, and we done that in 4 races with Mero Mero. And thanks to Scott Bathurst for keeping us in inventory and taking care of us on our shirt product. But it's we wanted something different. My godfather and my father and a bunch of their buddies that they all went to school with, they've all had 49 and 50 Fords and Mercuries and Lincolns. And I thought that that's what I wanted to do. I seen Johnny Rocca as a kid, and I thought that car was always cool. And, it was just, if I was going to build my last Pro Mod, I wanted it to be a 49 Mercury. So we went out and started looking for things and found them, and I modified them and took them to Larry Jeffers, and he built a buck and a mold, and we've got what we've got today.
I was seeing the teaser pics of the cars Jeffers was working on. I was like, oh, this thing's like, I was like, this is going to look amazing. Like, you could just tell the proportions. I'm like, God, like, this is going to be amazing. What's Craig going to do with it? I figured it'd been like some crazy, like, candy purple color. And then I saw the pictures that Kevin Diassi dropped for Race Pages Digital, and like, legit, I was like, this car's about to break social media. Like,
Yep.
This has so much cool to it. It's unreal. And lo and behold, I mean, the response to the car has been unbelievable. Now, what's the roundabout number that people have asked you about the paint on the car?
As far as
that you've had to explain that no, it's not paint, it's a wrap.
Oh, no, it's when the barn burner come around, I basically interviewed people to wrap it and paint it, and Kryptonite Customs sold me on their program for the barn burner. And Chris had been in business for quite some time before he got to the barn burner, but that with 3 or 4 other cars really got him the advertising that he had really been wanting. I mean, when we introduced that car at PRI, there were people complaining, or the other vendors around it, because there were so many people, nobody could get through the aisle.
Oh yeah.
And, Chris was very thankful that the turnout that he got, and he showed up the next year with another vehicle that didn't bring as much presence. But we were really happy with the turnout, and he was ecstatic about it. And then when I told him that we were doing this Mercury, he got pretty excited, and he didn't tell me till after I dropped the car off to him that he was retiring, and his lead graphic artist was going to be buying the company. So me and the graphic artist and Chris had gotten together on what we wanted to do, and they didn't want to start on anything till they got the car, because the car was so round. You weren't going to be able to print a bunch of straight lines and then be straight on the car. And he'd had the car a couple of weeks, and I go, I said, I want a gold car, and I want all the top surfaces laced. And we kind of went through what lacing a vehicle looked like, and how it was produced in the 70s and 80s and the 60s. And he sent me a picture of the car just in gold and lace. And I go, looks good, put color on it now. And, he ran with it. He done exactly what they wanted to do with it. And I couldn't be happier. The guys at Kryptonite knocked it out of the park. And, it would have been really easy to do black with a flame job down, a traditional flame job down the middle of it, or plum crazy purple and some kind of trick white flame package on it. but I think that's what everybody would expect.
Oh yeah, that's what I was expecting. Well,
but when me and Mark Woodruff were in a similar business model and sell the same products, and we've been going to SEMA for 20 years, and those were always cars that you kind of walk by because it wasn't production collision repair like what we do. And as you get older, you look at the craftsmanship that is there and the intricacy that's there. And I kind of thought, well, this is what I want to do on my car. I want it to look like something that come out of LA, in the 60s and the 70s. And, it needs to be a wrap. Number one, it's more cost effective. And number two, it'd have been in paint jail still, and we wouldn't be racing it. But the wrap companies have gotten pretty good. The barn burner was in the 3M catalog for the wrap product quite a few times, and there are different distribution markets that you would buy wrap materials in. It was in as well. And but the guys at Kryptonite, I can't say enough about them, because not only did they design that and install it, but they planned where all the brake lines were going to be in the car. So a brake line is as hidden as it possibly can, and that's something that a lot of wrap companies don't pay attention to, because we're installing it and this is where it's at. So you need to take that into consideration when you're pricing something like this. But the paint job would have been well over $50,000 to get that done. I don't think we'd still have it.
And that's why I asked how many people asked about the paint on it, because I'm assuming that you get everybody that walks up and that's like, oh, that's you have to explain to them, no, that's not a paint job. Because I know my dad saw, he goes, that's an amazing paint job on that car, because he saw it on the live feed. I'm like, Dad, that's a wrap. And he didn't believe me. I'm like, I snapped a picture of it up at Norwalk. I'm like, no, trust me, this is a freaking wrap. And it just, you unless you really look close and know what you're looking for, until you get up on it, it looks like paint.
Oh yeah.
And I guess too, probably going with a wrap versus paint is it kind of takes that factor out of it. If it had a $50,000 paint job on it, if you so much as nicked it, you would cry a little bit. With a wrap, at least it's not as bad, right?
It's more durable, but I mean the Pro Mod racers are like motorcycle riders. There's two kinds: those that have gone down and those that are going down. And you're just one bad decision away from piling that thing into a wall. So it's it allows us to do repairs and it look as good as new in a timely fashion.
Yeah, it's stuff like that you don't think of as well. And then, I'm sure, what was it like in the process working with Larry to have a car built like this? Because there's probably a few things that he had to take in consideration building the chassis when you presented him. I want to put this kind of body on it because it's not a new Camaro or a 67 Camaro. What kind of interesting predicaments did that put him in with what he had to do?
Well, they never started a chassis until they got the body 100% done, because the width is something else. I mean, that car at the rocker is 10 inches wider than a 69 Camaro.
Whoa.
It's 4 inches narrower at the rocker than Randy Merrick's Corvette. So, I mean, you go from one spectrum to the other there. When I told him I wanted to do it, he thought, yeah, that'll be cool. Let's do it. So I got the body all done and got it the way I wanted it to get to him. And he was pretty stoked on it for a while. And then he kind of got, this thing's, I don't know about this. And then I started telling him what it was going to be painted like. And he kind of got disinterested in it a little bit, but he was glad that it wasn't a Camaro or a Mustang. Well, when it come back from Kryptonite, because we had some trouble getting a rear end with all the COVID stuff going on, he'd made a jig to where we could roll it around on the jig, and I delivered it to Tulsa to Kryptonite. When they got it done and brought it back, his jaw was on the ground until it left. He told me, he says, everybody makes fun of me. He says, I come out and I walk by it and I just stop and stare at it, and it's changing colors, or I find something that I didn't see. And he says, everybody makes fun of me now. So when you look at it, it kind of does, and it does flip colors. There's a lot of pearlescent that a lot of people don't think that you can have in that wrap product that you can have in paint product, and it has a lot of depth to it, and that's where Chris, using the latest, greatest state-of-the-art product from 3M, it's done so well.
And with this being such a different kind of, the chassis is different, the body's different, has there been a big adjustment for you getting used to driving this car versus other, door cars you've driven?
This thing's like sitting in your lazy boy. I mean,
Really?
you get in it and you put it on the mat and you let go of the button and it just goes. A lot of times I'll keep the mic and go, it didn't leave. And when we get back, it was the fastest 60 foot that it's had. It's so much more different than what I'm used to driving. I did drive Larry's bus for a while, and it's a very docile Pro Mod in itself, but it's also 120 inches long. So when people try to correct, and maneuver the bus around, it kind of gets them in trouble because you have to wait on it like a dragster just to come back to you. Where in a Pro Mod, you've got to get back under control with it. So the good things are, it is a new car and new cars drive well. The good things is now you've got room to get the transmission out. You're not stuck in there with one guy trying to pick that turbo 400 up and getting it out and all hunched over. We've got room because the car is so tall through the middle. No, it's everything on Larry's side had worked out for the best, and I'm 120% happy with it. It's every vendor complimented every vendor that had it prior. There wasn't anybody pointing figures of, well, they should have done this or they should have done that. So that always makes for a good project when all your vendors get along.
It's interesting you mention the transmission situation because that's another thing, with the project cars I'm working on, I'm doing stuff on them that seems more difficult now, but it's about the maintenance side of things. And then after you've had a few cars, you've worked on some cars, you kind of learn that lesson, don't you?
Oh yeah. We can't use a traditional T-handle to get the spark plugs out because the motor's back underneath the cowl so far. So we're still working on some things to make it a little easier to work on, but for it to come out and look like it does and perform like it does, we'll figure out how to get spark plugs out of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a crowd favorite for sure because again, it's different. I remember I saw one of the pictures from Martin, and he had your car, Randy Adler's car, that the dude with I think it was Chip King with that Mustang. Like,
yes, that was Chip.
I'm like, man, that like right there, we need more of that in Pro Mod. I told Galimi, I was like, you guys are doing it right there. For some reason with the NMCA, you get these cars to show up like that, and it's cool because it's all different vehicles that are there, and it's awesome to see. You just need a Willys in there now to give it the full throwback feel.
Well, and Galagos has the Willys. So, I mean, you've got Midwest Pro Mod, NMCA, the PDRA. I think Northeast Pro Mod went to 8th Mile now, that are going to 8th Mile venues, and the rules are very, very similar. I mean, there's not a whole lot to change to float between those. And, look at the Snowbirds. They had 50 cars sign up immediately, and I think Anthony told me, or Victor had told me that, he had 22 on the waiting list to get into the 50 car show. So I think that lets you know when we're doing things right. If NHRA would take a look at more 8th Mile racing at that level, I think they could see more numbers come up.
And I think that's, what when you talk with people, you get those conversations. Oh, what would you build if you had the money? I'm like, dude, build a Pro Mod. You can swing a cat and hit a Pro Mod race somewhere in the Midwest, even if it's like a local, 16 car shootout or something where you tone it down, go race top sportsman. There's a lot of opportunities to run these cars in safe environments.
Yes.
Now, Craig, I always like to throw my guests some fun questions to kind of, start to slow things down and finish it up. and this is going to be in regards to building a car. Now, you've got the opportunity to build another car besides the Merc. What would you dig out of your bag of tricks? Because you had the barn burner, you got a Mero Mero. What would you follow that up with?
That's a difficult one. Probably a 37 Ford or something.
Something totally, completely off the reservation different.
Yep.
That again would be interesting to see a Pro Mod version of that car. Just like your car, the El Mero is a modern interpretation of the ones previous to it. You see the guys doing the Fox body Pro Mods. Yeah, I think a 37 Ford. Now that would be interesting to see, because again, you don't see a lot of them.
Well, the hood ornament does everything on that car.
Oh yeah.
Because the hood ornament, you turn 90 degrees to lift the hood up. So there's a lot of fun to be had with the hood ornament in that car.
And right now, Larry Jeffers is probably going, "Oh no, make it stop, no." Meanwhile, the guys at Kryptonite Customs, their heads full of sugar plums and dancing. They're like, "Yay!" And the chassis guy's like, "No, please no." I've got to design a hood now. No.
Yep.
Well, Craig, our time here is coming to an end. I'd like to give my guests their opportunity to thank all their sponsors, John Force style, tell people where to find them at. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you so you can thank who you need to thank and tell people where they can learn more about what you got going on.
Sure. Kryptonite Customs for colors. There is nobody, and there's a couple of big facilities here in Indy, but nobody can compete with Kryptonite for the quality and the presentation that they can do. Larry Jeffers, he inventories parts for steel roof and quarters cars. I mean, the guy is one of my best friends. He's got an oil product that works very well. We've switched all of our engine customers to, the engine side of our deal. Brad Anderson and Darren Mayer at DMPE have gotten us all of our core parts, our heads and our intakes. And Darren has helped us with port design. Of course, he goes through all of our superchargers to get them to where they're at. Wiseco, MGP, Molly, the guys at Jessel have done a fantastic job with us. PSI on valve springs, Manton on their rocker arms and push rod product. Mark Mickey at M&M, Mark Menser at Menser Motorsports. Again, these guys are some of my best friends, but are also vendors to me. And the service after the sale means far more than the price that you're trying to get. There's a wealth of knowledge there with everything that they look at. And it's been great to work with all of them. PST on our drive shaft product, Chrisman with our rear end product, the guys at Firecore for our wires. They've all been good. Fuel Tech, at any hour of the day, I can get an answer from somebody from Fuel Tech Corporate or an affiliate. Joe Oplowski at Hyperactive. He's been with me 20 years in our racing product and has been very good to us. Tom Radloff, Andy Smith for all their dedication on the team side. But it's been a good run with our two Pro Mods, and we're looking to try to win a championship in 2022. We finished second with the NMCA, and that's been a pretty good statement for us. But plan on doing a lot of racing and heading south here after Halloween. So we'll see how much more we can advance the Mercury. But I appreciate everybody's time, and thank you, Brian.
No problem. Of course, I've got to thank my sponsors: Performance Distributors, Airflow Research, ProCharger, Holly, MSD, Flowmaster, Mosier Engineering, Comp Cams, Fuel Air Spark Technology, Eldebrock, Manley, JE Pistons, and Dart. Craig, thanks for joining me on the show. Next time I see you at the track, I'm going to have to pick me up one of those snazzy shirts so I can show that badass car off.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
See you soon.
Yep.